He offered to share his sleeping bag with the alien girl. What she did next was unexpected. Captain Richard Mills stood on the bridge of the transport vessel Stellar Voyager, his muscular frame silhouetted against the vast expanse of stars visible through the viewport. His dark hair was cropped short, military style, and his jawline could have been chiseled from granite at 32. He'd seen his fair share of strange assignments, but this one took the cake. "You wanted to transport what?" he asked, eyebrow raised as he stared at the holographic image of his commanding officer, Colonel Harris. "Not what, Captain?" Who? Harris corrected, his weathered face betraying no emotion. "A humanoid alien. Female high-value package, need-to-know basis." Only Richard crossed his arms over his broad chest. "And what exactly do I need to know that she needs to get to Proxima Station? In one piece, that's it." "No name, no species, no reason." Harris's expression hardened. "Captain Mills, this isn't a request. It's an order. The Voyager departs at 0600 tomorrow. Your passenger will arrive 30 minutes prior. Get her to Proxima safely. That's all." The transmission ended before Richard could protest further. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. 5 years in the Galactic Transport Division, and he'd never been given such a vague assignment. Usually it was straightforward: move cargo or personnel from point A to point B, avoid trouble, collect payment. Simple. This felt different, dangerous. Even Captain, his first officer, Lieutenant Jackson, approached from behind. "Everything all right? We've got a special passenger coming aboard tomorrow," Richard replied, turning away from the viewport. "Apparently she's important enough that even I don't get to know who or what she is." Jackson's eyebrows shot up. "That's unusual. Tell me about it." Richard checked his wrist display, make sure the VIP quarters are prepped, and run a full diagnostic on all systems. If this passenger is as important as Harris implies, I want this ship running at peak efficiency." "Yes, sir." As Jackson left to carry out his orders, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that this assignment would be more trouble than it was worth. The human race had only been part of the Galactic Coalition for 15 years. Still newcomers by most standards, Earth had proven its worth quickly, though humans might lack the advanced technology of some species. But they made up for it with adaptability, resilience, and a knack for thinking outside the box. These qualities had earned them respect and sometimes fear among the older species. It also meant they often got the assignments no one else wanted. The next morning, Richard stood at the docking bay watching as a sleek black shuttle approached the Voyager right on time. The shuttle docked with barely a sound, its airlock cycling open to reveal two figures, both wearing the distinctive armor of Coalition security forces. Between them stood a smaller figure draped in a hooded cloak that concealed everything except a pair of delicate hands with skin that seemed to shimmer with a faint iridescent quality. Captain Mills, one of the security officers, stepped forward. "Your passenger." As ordered, Richard nodded, extending a hand in greeting to the cloaked figure. "Welcome aboard the Stellar Voyager. I'm Captain Richard Mills." The hood tilted upward, and Richard found himself staring into most unusual eyes he'd ever seen, large, almond-shaped, and vibrant orange that seemed to glow from within. The cloak parted slightly, revealing a feminine face with features that were almost human, yet subtly different, more refined, with a luminescent quality to her skin. "Thank you, Captain," she said, her voice melodic with an accent he couldn't place. "I appreciate your discretion in this matter." The security officers handed Richard a sealed data chipper, documentation, and destination coordinates for your eyes only. With that, they turned and departed, leaving Richard alone with his mysterious passenger. "I'll show you to your quarters," he said, gesturing toward the quarter. "We'll be underway shortly." She nodded, following silently beside him. Up close, Richard noticed she was shorter than he'd initially thought, perhaps 5.5 feet tall, and moved with a fluid grace that suggested either extensive training or non-human physiology. "Probably both do." "You have a name I can call you?" he asked as they walked. There was a pause, then. "Naren, you may call me Naren." "Naren," he repeated. "Well, Naren, our journey to Proxima Station should take approximately 7 standard days. Your quarters have private facilities and a communication terminal, though I should warn you that deep space communications will be limited once we're beyond the relay network." "That won't be a problem," she replied. "I prefer to keep to myself." They've reached the VIP quarters, and Richard activated the door panel. "If you need anything, you can reach me or any crew member through the ship's communication system. I mean meals could be delivered here or taken in the Masal. Naren stepped into the room finally, lowering her hood to reveal a cascade of silvery hair that seemed to catch and reflect light in impossible ways. Her face, now fully visible, was strikingly beautiful, almost unnervingly so. Thank you, Captain, she said, those orange eyes studying him with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. I'm sure we'll have a pleasant journey. Somehow, Richard doubted that very much 3 days into their voyage, things had been surprisingly uneventful. Naren kept herself rarely leaving her quarters except for occasional walks around the ship's observation deck during off-peak hours. The crew, sensing something unusual about their passenger, gave her a wide berth. Richard was in his office reviewing supply manifests when an alarm blared. Captain, to the bridge. Jackson's voice came through the emergency. Richard was moving. Before the message finished, sprinting through corridors and arriving on the bridge, breathless. Report, he demanded, taking in the tense faces of his crew. Unidentified vessels, sir, the tactical officer responded. 3 of them approaching fast from the port side. They're not responding to hails. The main screen showed 3 sleek, predatory-looking ships closing in on the Voyager. Pirates, Richard muttered. The sector was known for occasional raider activity, but they usually avoided coalition transport vessels. Shields up. Prepare defensive measures before his orders could be carried out. The ship rocked violently as energy weapons impacted their hull shields at 60%. Someone shouted, "Return fire." Richard ordered, gripping command chair. As another blast hit them, the Voyager wasn't a warship, but it wasn't defenseless either. Their return fire struck one of the attacking vessels, causing it to veer off. Sir, they're targeting our engines, Jackson reported. They don't want to destroy us. Richard realized they want to board us. His thought immediately went to Naren. Was she the target? Had someone leaked information about their mysterious passenger? The ship shuddered again, and the lights flickered. Engine hit. We're losing power to the main drive. Richard made a split-second decision. Divert all power to forward shields and weapons. Lieutenant, prepare for emergency jump. But, sir, with the engines damaged, I know the risks. Do it. As the crew scrambled to comply, the door to the bridge slid open, and Naren stepped in. She'd abandoned her cloak, revealing a form-fitting suit of an unfamiliar material that accentuated her slender figure. Bright orange lines, not clothing, but part of her skin, traced intricate patterns across her visible skin. Captain, she said calmly, despite the chaos around them, those ships are here for me. Richard stared at her. Who? Are you really? Her orange eyes met his. Someone who can help if you'll let me. Before Richard could respond, another blast rocked the ship, sending them both stumbling. The lights went out completely, plunging the bridge into darkness before emergency lighting kicked in with a dull red glow. Main power down. Jackson reported grimly. Emergency jump is no longer an option. Richard looked at Naren, whose strange markings seemed to pulse brighter in the dim light. I hope you've got a plan, he said, her lips curved into a small smile. Always, Captain, always. Everyone, battle stations, Richard barked, his mind racing through options. Jackson, get damage control teams to the engine room. We need those engines back online. Yesterday, yes, sir, Jackson replied, already relaying orders through his commune. The tactical display showed the pirate vessels moving into boarding position, surrounding the Voyager like wolves, circling wounded prey. They'll breach within minutes, the tactical officer warned. Richard turned to Naren, who stood eerily calm amidst the chaos. You said you can help. Now would be the time. She nodded, approaching the navigation console. I need access to your ship systems. Richard hesitated only briefly before nodding to the navigator, who stepped aside. Naren's fingers danced across the controls with surprising familiarity. What are you doing? Richard asked, watching as unfamiliar code flashed across the screen, creating a blind spot. She replied without looking up. Captain, when I give the word, I need you to cut all remaining power. Everything except life support. That would leave us completely vulnerable, he protested. Her orange eyes flicked to his. Trust me. As something in her gaze, confidence perhaps, or simply desperation, made Richard nod. On your mark. Narn continued her work, the orange markings on her skin pulsing more intensely. 3, 2, 1. Now cut power, Richard ordered. The bridge plunged into darkness again, even the emergency lights fading. Only the faint glow of Naren's markings provided any illumination, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the crew. What now? Richard whispered. Wait. Naren whispered back. They can't see us. Our shields are down, the tactical officer hissed. They'll tear through the hull, no, Naren said. Confidently, they won't true to her word. The pirate ships suddenly seemed. Confused, their coordinated approach faltered, and they began moving erratically as if searching their scanning for us, Naren explained softly. But they won't find us. I've masked our signature. How? Richard demanded. She merely smiled, the orange lines on her skin dimming slightly. A trick of my people. For tense minutes, they watched through the viewport as the pirate vessels circled, growing increasingly frantic in their search patterns. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the ships regrouped and jumped away. They're gone, the tactical officer confirmed, checking his instruments as power gradually returned to the bridge. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crew, but Richard wasn't celebrating yet. He fixed Naren with a hard stare eye. Think it's time you told me exactly who you are and why pirates are hunting you across the galaxy. Naren's expression turned solemn. Not here. Your quarters would be more appropriate for this conversation. 20 minutes later, after ensuring the ship was secure and repairs were underway, Richard faced Naren across the small table in his private quarters. Talk, he said simply. Naren sighed, running a hand through her silvery hair. I am Naren, New York, daughter of the High Counselor of the Luminari Collective. Richard blinked. The Luminari were one of the oldest species in the Coalition, renowned for their advanced technology and reclusive nature. Few humans had ever even seen one. The Luminary don't interact with other species. He said, why are you on my ship? Because my father was assassinated 3 weeks ago, she replied, her voice steady despite the way her words. And I'm next in line for leadership. Richard leaned back, processing this. The pirates, not pirates. Assassins disguised as raiders, the same ones who killed my father. Her orange eyes hardened. There's a faction within our collective that believes we should withdraw completely from the Coalition. They see my father's policies of gradual integration as a betrayal of our heritage, and I intend to continue his work. She said firmly, the galaxy is changing. Isolation is no longer an option, even for the Luminari. Richard nodded slowly. In Proxima Station Nation, a rendezvous point my father's loyalists have arranged safe transport to our home world, where I'll claim my rightful position. She leaned forward. Captain Mills, I understand this is more than you signed up for, but I need to reach Proxima Station alive. The ship's damaged. Richard said bluntly, we've lost one engine completely and life support is running on backup systems. Even if we can make repairs, we'll need to conserve power. Narain's expression didn't change. Then we conserve power, whatever it takes. It means cutting non-essential systems, including environmental controls. He met her gaze steadily. Temperature is going to drop significantly. I understand. Richard stood, moving to his comm unit. I'll inform the crew. We'll need to distribute emergency thermal gear. Thank you, Captain. Narain said softly. He paused, looking back at her. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get you to Proxima in one piece within hours. The effects of the power conservation measures were evident throughout. The ship corridors were dimly lit, and the temperature had already dropped several degrees. Crew members move about in the thermal gear, could their breath visible in the chilled air. Richard made his rounds, checking on repairs and ensuring his people were coping with the conditions. The damage was worse than initially reported. They'd be lucky to limp to Proxima at half speed. When he returned to bridge, he found Naren there, wrapped in a standard-issue thermal blanket that seemed too large for her slender frame. She was studying the star charts with Jackson, discussing potential routes. Could shave 12 hours off our journey time, she was saying, but it would take us closer to the Veil Nebula, which is contested space. Jackson pointed out. After one attack, I'm not eager to invite another. I agree, Richard said. Join them, we stick to Coalition shipping lanes, even if it takes longer. NAR nodded, though he could see she wasn't entirely convinced. She also seemed to be shivering slightly despite the blanket. Are you all right? He asked. Fine, she replied quickly. My species simply runs warmer than humans. As cold is uncomfortable. Richard frowned. Why didn't you say something? We could adjust the environmental controls in your quarters and divert power from repairs. No, she shook her head firmly. I won't receive special treatment while your crew suffers. He had to admire her resolve, even if it was misguided at At least take an extra thermal blanket. We can't have our VUP freezing to death. Before we reach Proxima, she smiled. Faintly as you wish, Captain, as the day wore on the temperature continued to. Drop the engineering team worked tirelessly on repairs, but progress was slow with limited power by ship's night. The interior of the Voyager had reached near freezing temperatures. Richard couldn't sleep, partly due to the cold, but mostly due to worry the ship was vulnerable. Their passenger was. Apparently the heir to one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and assassins could return at any moment. He was reviewing repair reports in his quarters when a soft knock came at his door. Enter, he called, expecting Jackson with an update. Instead, Naren, stepped and wrapped in multiple blankets, yet still visibly shaking her lips, had taken on a bluish tinge, and the orange markings on her skin seemed dimmer than before. Captain, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I apologize for disturbing you. Richard was on his feet. Immediately, you're freezing my quarters. The heating unit failed completely, she explained. I tried to repair it, but why? Didn't you call for assistance? He demanded, guiding her to sit on the edge of his bunk. Your crew has more important tasks. She clutched the blankets tighter. I thought I could manage. Richard ran a hand through his hair. Frustrated, you're no good to anyone. If you freeze to death, he rummaged through his storage compartment, pulling out his emergency kit. Inside was a self-heating sleeping bag designed for extreme conditions. Here, he said, unrolling it on his bunk. This has a built-in heating element, battery-powered, so it won't drain the ship's resources. Naren eyed it gratefully. Thank you. Richard hesitated, then made a decision. And take my quarters for night. I'll bunk with Jackson. No, she said quickly. I can't displace you from your own room. It's not a problem, Captain, she interrupted, those orange eyes meeting his. I've already imposed enough. She seemed to struggle with her next words. Perhaps we could share the sleeping bag. Appears large enough for two, and shared body heat would be more efficient. Richard felt his eyebrows rise involuntarily. That's not exactly protocol. A faint smile touched her lips. I won't tell the Coalition if you won't. He should refuse. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, and potentially complicated given who she was. But she was clearly suffering, and the practical part of his brain acknowledged the logic of her suggestion. All right, he said. Finally, but just to get your temperature back up. He activated the sleeping bag's heating element, which hummed softly as it began to warm. It'll take a few minutes to reach optimal temperature. Naren nodded, still shivering beneath her blankets. Thank you, Captain. Truly, Richard, he said, if we're going to share a sleeping bag, you might as well use my name. Richard, she repeated, and somehow the way she said it made his name sound different, almost musical, as the sleeping bag warmed. Richard busied himself with checking reports, giving the rain some privacy. When the indicator light turned green, signaling the optimal temperature had been reached, he turned back to her. It's ready, he said. You should get in first. She nodded, standing somewhat unsteadily. Then, to his shock, she began removing her outer garments. What are you doing? He asked, alarmed. Naren paused, looking confused. Direct skin contact provides the most efficient heat transfer. Is this not common knowledge among humans? Richard felt his face warm. Despite the cold air it is, but oh, she said, understanding dawning, this is a cultural taboo for your species. Not exactly a taboo, he clarified, just not something done casually between people who barely know each other. She considered this, then continued removing her clothing. We are not casual acquaintances. Richard, you're risking your life and your ship to protect me by my culture standards that create a bond of significance. Before he could formulate a response, she had stripped down completely, revealing her slender form marked by those fascinating orange lines that traced patterns across her entire body. They pulled faintly like circuits, carrying energy. Richard averted his eyes, though not before noticing how the markings seemed to flow like rivers of light across her skin, converging at her heart and branching outward. Your markings, he said, keeping his gaze fixed on the wall. They're part of you? Yes, she replied, slipping into the sleeping bag. They're called luminous lines. They appear at puberty and grow more complex throughout our lives. They're both decorative and functional. They help us channel and control our natural energy. They're beautiful, he said, honestly, still not looking at her. Thank you, she said softly. The sleeping bag is quite warm now. Will you join me? promised not to violate any human to boss. There was a hint of humor in her voice that made him glance at her. She had pulled the sleeping bag up to her chin, her silver hair spilling out across his pillow, her expression one of innocent expectation with a sigh of resignation. Richard removed his uniform down to his boxers. He wasn't quite ready to match her level of comfort with nudity, and carefully slipped into the sleeping bag. Beside her, the warmth was immediate and welcome after hours in the freezing ship. Narain's skin was surprisingly warm now that she was out of the cold, and the orange lines on her body provided a soft ambient glow in the dimness of the room. Better? He asked, trying to maintain a professional distance within the confines of the sleeping bag. Much. She murmured, her eyes half closed. Your species generates remarkable heat. They lay in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the heating element and the distant creaks of the damaged ship. Richard, Narn said eventually, her voice drowsy. Yes, what are these? To his surprise, her hand slipped beneath the waistband of his boxers, coming to rest against his testicles. Her touch was curious, not sexual, but he still jerked in shock. What are you doing? He gasped gently, but firmly removing her hand. She blinked at him, genuinely confused. I was curious about these small spheres. My species doesn't have anything similar. What purpose do they serve? Richard stared at her, momentarily speechless. Was she serious? The innocent curiosity in her orange eyes suggested she was. Their reproductive organs. He managed, finally part of human male. Anatomy fascinating. She said, seemingly embarrassed. They seem rather vulnerable. For something so important, my people keep our reproductive organs internal. That's probably more sensible, Richard agreed, still processing the surreal. Conversation look among humans touching those parts is considered intimate, reserved for our romantic partners, I see. She nodded thoughtfully. I apologize for the transgression your human customs are. Still new to me, it's fine. He said, though fine wasn't exactly the word he'd used to describe having an alien princess. Casually fondle his testicles, just an ask before you explore next time. Her lips curved into a small smile. I will remember that. They lapsed into silence again, and Richard found himself hyper aware of her presence. Beside him, the subtle floral scent of her hair, the gentle pulsing of her orange markings, the warmth of her skin against his. Your ship, she said suddenly, the Voyager. You care for it deeply? It wasn't a question. Yes, he answered. Anyway, 5 years as her captain, she's home. My father taught me that the measure of a leader is how they treat those under their protection. Naren murmured. I've watched you with your crew. You're a good leader, Richard Mills. Something in her tone made him turn his head to look at her. Their faces were inches apart, her orange eyes luminous in the dim light. I'm just doing my job, kind. He said. No, she replied softly. You're doing more than that. You're risking everything to help someone you barely know. Before he could respond, the ship's alarm blared again, shattering the moment. Captain, to the bridge. Jackson's voice came through the comm. They're back. Richard bolted upright at the sound of the alarm, his military training kicking in instantly. Naren's hand was still beneath his boxers, her curious fingers resting against his most sensitive anatomy. That's the proximity alert, he explained, gently removing her hand and scrambling out of the sleeping bag. Stay here, I'm coming with you, Naren insisted, rising from the sleeping bag with no apparent self-consciousness about her nudity. Her orange markings pulsed more intensely in the dim light, casting eerie shadows across the cabin. Richard averted his eyes as he hastily pulled on his uniform. Fine, but get dressed quickly. By the time they reached the bridge, Jackson had already taken command. The view screen showed a sleek vessel approaching, not the pirate ships that had attacked them earlier, but something else entirely. Krell vessel, Jackson reported there. Hailing us. Richard nodded. On screen, the image shifted to reveal reptilian, alien with iridescent scales and vertical pupils. Captain Mills, this is Commander Vexner, the KSS Interceptor. We received your distress signal. Distress signal, Richard frowned. We didn't send one. Vexner's expression remained cold, his scale face barely moving, perhaps not intentionally, but your ship's emergency beacon activated during the attack. We've been tracking you. Since then, his slitted eyes shifted, slightly focusing on something or someone behind Richard. I see your passenger is with you. Richard glanced back to see Naren standing just behind him, her silver hair now neatly braided and her form-fitting suit back in place. though it did little to conceal the glowing patterns beneath. Yes, Richard said carefully, we're transporting her. To Proxima Station, as ordered. Our plans have changed. Vexer replied, he will be. Taking custody of the package, now prepare for docking. The transmission ended before Richard could respond. I don't like this, he muttered to Jackson. The Krell don't usually involve themselves in routine transports. Nothing about this mission has been routine, Sir Jackson pointed out. Naren stepped closer. Her voice low. Captain, I don't think we should trust them. Why not? Because my father warned me about the Krell Empire. He said they've been seeking luminary technology for decades, hoping to use it against the Coalition. Richard studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. And who exactly are you that the Krell would be interested? She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I am Nurin Nick's daughter, the High Counselor of the Luminary Collective. My father was assassinated 3 weeks ago, and I'm next in line for leadership. The revelation hung in the air between them. Richard thought back to their intimate moment in the sleeping bag, her innocent curiosity, her lack of understanding about human anatomy and customs. It made more sense now. She wasn't just any alien, but essentially royalty from one of the most secretive and advanced civilizations in the Coalition. Why didn't you tell me this before? He asked. Because I was instructed to trust no one, she replied. My father's killers could be anywhere, even allied with empires like the Krell. The ship shuddered slightly as the interceptor initiated docking procedures. We need to make a decision, Captain, Jackson said urgently. Richard weighed his options. His orders had been to deliver Naren to Proxima Station, not hand her over to the Krell Empire, and if what she said was true, doing so could put her in grave danger. Jackson, initiate emergency undocking procedures. He ordered to divert all remaining power to engines. Sir Jackson looked surprised, but moved to comply. We're continuing to Proxima, as ordered, Richard explained. If Commander Vexner has legitimate business with our passenger, he can take it up with command when we arrive the bridge. Crew sprang into action, their movements urgent but precise. They won't let us go easily, Naren warned. Probably not, Richard agreed, but the Voyager still has a few tricks left. As predicted, the interceptor immediately attempted to override their systems, but Jackson had already isolated their controls. When that failed, the larger vessel tried to physically prevent them from breaking away, using magnetic grapples to hold them in place. Reverse thrusters full power, Richard ordered. Burn through our reserves if you have to. The Voyager strained against the grapples, its damaged hull groaning. Under the stress for a moment, it seemed they were trapped. Then with a violent lurch, they broke free, the sudden momentum sending everyone stumbling. Guess out of here, maximum speed. The ship accelerated away from the interceptor, which immediately gave chase. They're charging weapons, the tactical officer reported. Evasive maneuvers, Richard ordered. Head for that nebula. The radiation should mask our signature. As they raced toward the swirling gases of a nearby nebula, Naren moved to stand beside Richard's command chair. Thank you, she said softly, for trusting me. He glanced up at her, remembering the feel of her skin against his in the sleeping bag, the innocent way she explored him despite the circumstances. Or perhaps because of them, he felt a connection to her that went beyond duty or physical attraction. Don't thank me. Yet he replied, we still have to get you to Proxima in one piece. She smiled, her orange markings pulsing in what he was beginning to recognize as a sign of strong emotion. We were together as the Voyager plunged to the nebula's protective embrace. Richard couldn't help but wonder what other surprises his mission and Naren herself had in store. The Voyager plunged deeper into the nebula, its sensors struggling to penetrate the swirling clouds of ionized gas and stellar dust. The interceptor had fallen back, unwilling to risk damage to its more sophisticated systems in the radiation-heavy environment. We've lost them for now, Jackson reported, but we can't stay in here indefinitely. The radiation will eventually compromise our remaining systems. Richard nodded grimly. Options, Captain Narn interjected, stepping closer to the navigation console. There's something here, may I? After a moment's hesitation, Richard gestured for the navigator to step aside. Naren's slender fingers danced across the controls, inputting a complex sequence that seemed to recalibrate the sensors. Suddenly, the view screen shifted, revealing what appeared to be a structure hidden within the nebula, a small station constructed of material that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. all Luminari. Outpost. She explained, her orange markings pulsing with excitement. One of my father's secret sanctuaries. They can repair your ship and provide protection until we're ready to continue the Proxima. You didn't think to mention this earlier? Richard asked, raising an eyebrow. Naren's lips curved into a small smile. I wasn't certain it would still be operational. My father established several such outposts throughout Coalition space, places where Luminari, who shared his vision, could work without interference from the traditionalists. Richard studied the structure on the screen. It appeared dormant with no visible lights or signs of activity. How do we know it's safe? Don't she admit it, but it's our best option right now. He weighed their limited choices. Continue in the nebula until their systems failed to attempt to outrun the interceptor with damaged engines or take a chance on Naren's. Sanctuary set course for the outpost. He ordered finally, but approached with caution, weapons ready as they drew. Close to the station seemed to awaken subtle lights appearing along its surface. A transmission came through, consisting not of words but a series of musical tones that made the bridge crew exchange confused glances. Naren stepped forward, responding with similar tones that emanated not from the ship's communication system, but from her own body, her orange markings pulsing in rhythm with the sounds they recognize. Me, she explained, we're being granted access. A docking bay opened like an iris, revealing a cavernous space within. Richard gave the order to proceed, and the Voyager glided into the sanctuary, the bay doors closing behind them. Life support is compatible with human physiology, Naren assured him as they prepared to disembark. But there are cultural differences you should be aware of, such as Richard asked, remembering her casual attitude toward nudity and physical contact. The Luminari communicate not just through words, but through light and touch. What might seem intimate to humans is often just conversation to us. She hesitated. Also, my status as the High Counselor's daughter means they will expect certain protocols. I'll follow your lead, Richard promised. Just keep me from causing an interstellar incident. When the airlock cycled open, they were greeted by three luminary, tall, slender beings with the same luminescent skin as Naren, though their markings varied in color and pattern. They bowed deeply, their markings pulsing in synchronized patterns. Naren stepped forward, her own markings responding in kind. No words were exchanged, but Richard could sense a complex communication occurring through light and subtle movements. Finally, she turned to him. Captain, this is Eller, the station commander. They welcome us and offer assistance with repairs. Richard nodded respectfully to the tallest Luminari, whose markings were a deep purple. We're grateful for your help. Elliot studied him with large, iridescent eyes. The human speaks, they observed, their voice melodic and slightly surprised. Fascinating. Humans communicate primarily through vocalization, Naren explained. Their light patterns are undeveloped. Elliot approached Richard, circling him with undisguised curiosity. May I? They asked, reaching toward him before Richard could respond. Ellier's fingers brushed against his temple. A strange sensation washed over him like a whisper directly into his mind, conveying not words but impressions. Welcome, curiosity, respect. Thank you, Richard managed slightly, disoriented by the experience. Your ship requires extensive repairs, Ellier stated. It will take time. You will stay among us until it is complete. As they were led deeper into the station, Richard noticed the environment changing, becoming warmer, more humid, with lighting that pulsed subtly in patterns that seemed to follow their movements. The few luminary they passed all stopped to observe him with undisguised interest, their markings flashing in what he assumed was their equivalent of whispered conversations. They've never seen a human before, Naren explained quietly. You're quite the novelty. I feel like a zoo exhibit, he muttered. She laughed, a musical sound that made her markings dance with light. They're particularly intrigued by your physical form. Luminary miles are different. Richard felt heat rise to his face, remembering her innocent exploration of his anatomy in the sleeping bag. Different, how less externally obvious, she replied with mischievous glint in her eye, and less responsive to touch. Before he could formulate a response to that, they were shown to adjacent chambers, spacious rooms with furnishings that seemed to grow organically from the walls and floors. Rest, Eller, we will begin repairs to your vessel later. There will be a gathering to honor the daughter of Nyx. After they departed, Richard explored his chamber, finding it both alien and strangely comfortable. The bed, if it could be Called that was a concave depression in the floor filled with something like water, but more viscous, maintaining its shape. When he cautiously pressed a hand into it, a soft chime announced Naren's arrival. She had changed into a flowing garment that left her shoulders and arms bare, her orange markings more prominent against the pale fabric. "Is your accommodation suitable?" she asked, entering with a fluid grace that seemed characteristic of her species. "It's different," he admitted, "but not unpleasant." She smiled, approaching where he stood. "I wanted to thank you again for trusting me, for protecting me. Few would have defied Coalition intelligence on the word of an alien. I follow my instincts," Richard said, "and my orders were to get you to Proxima safely." "Is that the only reason?" she asked, stepping closer until he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, see the subtle pulsing of her markings. Richard swallowed hard. Since their intimate moment in the sleeping bag, he'd been acutely aware of her not just as a passenger or even as an alien princess, but as a woman, a beautiful, fascinating woman who looked at him with undisguised interest. No, he admitted, not the only reason. Her markings brightened, and she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Among my people, life forces share through contact. The closer the contact, the deeper the connection. Is that why you remove your clothes in the sleeping bag?" He asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Partly," she acknowledged, "but also because I was curious about humans, about you." Her hand slid down to rest against his chest, directly over his heart. "Your heart beats so strongly, so differently from ours." Richard covered her hand with his own. "Naren, I'm not sure. This is when a Luminari chooses a mate," she interrupted softly. "It is not just for physical pleasure, but for the harmonizing of life forces. It is sacred." The implication of her words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "And is that what you're suggesting?" he asked carefully. Her orange eyes met his unwavering. "I am suggesting that what began in your sleeping bag need not end there, that perhaps our meeting was not merely a chance, but something more." Richard felt a pull toward her that defied logic or protocol, a connection that transcended their different species, their different worlds. "A gathering tonight," she continued, "it will include a ritual to honor my father's memory. I would be honored if you would stand with me as my chosen." "Your chosen," he repeated. "My companion, my protector." Her markings pulsed brighter. "My potential mate." The invitation was clear, the attraction undeniable in the strange, pulsing light of the luminary sanctuary far from Earth, and everything familiar. Richard made his decision. "I would be honored," he said, and bent to press his lips gently against hers. The gathering chamber pulsed with light and energy. Dozens of Luminari assembled in concentric circles around a central dais. Richard stood beside Naren, feeling distinctly out of place in his Coalition uniform among the flowing garments of the aliens, yet no one seemed to view him with suspicion. Only curiosity and surprisingly respect. Allier approached, now adorned with ceremonial markings that enhanced their natural purple patterns. "It is time," they announced, gesturing for Naren to step forward. She squeezed Richard's hand reassuringly before sending to the D's. The assembled luminary began a harmonic chant, their markings synchronizing into pulsing waves of light that flowed through the chamber like water. Elier presented Naren with a small crystal sphere that glowed with an inner fire, the essence of Nyx they had known left in our keeping until a rightful heir should claim it. Naren accepted the sphere, reverently holding it before her. "I, Naren, Nyx, daughter of High Counselor Turan." Nyx, accept the sacred trust and the responsibilities it entails. The sphere pulsed brighter, seeming to respond to her voice, then to Richard's astonishment. It projected a holographic image, the face of an older Luminari male, with distinguished features and markings similar to Naren's father. She whispered, her voice catching the image, spoke, its voice resonating with authority and warmth. "Naren, my daughter, if you are viewing this message, then I have passed into the great light, and you have found your way to one of our sanctuaries. There is much you must know." The hologram shifted, displaying star charts and data streams too complex for Richard to follow. "The traditionalists seek not merely to isolate our people, but to weaponize our technology against the Coalition they fear humanity most of. All for Inhumans they see a reflection of what we once were: adaptable, resilient, innovative qualities many Luminari have lost through millennia of isolation. Naren's markings pulsed rapidly as she absorbed her father's words. The hologram continued, I have left safeguards technologies that can counter their weapons, but they can only be activated by one with the primal pattern. The image shifted again, focusing directly on Naren. You, my daughter, carry this pattern. Within you it has lain dormant, but when the time comes it will awaken then too. Richard, shocked, the hologram turned, as if looking directly at him. Captain Richard Mills of Earth. A murmur ran through the assembled Luminari. Richard stepped forward, stunned. How did he know? My name, I selected you specifically for this mission. The hologram continued. Your psychological profile, your service, record, your genetic compatibility, all made you the ideal protector for my daughter. The connection between you is no accident, but carefully orchestrated. Necessity. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. Had his entire career been manipulated to bring him to this moment? Do not misunderstand, the hologram said, as if sensing his discomfort. Your choices remained your own. I merely ensured you would have the opportunity to make them. The bond that is formed between you and my daughter is genuine and essential for what is to come. The message ended. The sphere, dimming to a soft glow in her own, stood motionless, her markings pulsing erratically with emotion. Yallowa broke the silence. It is, as the prophecies foretold, the human and the bearer of the primal pattern united against darkness. Prophecies, row Richard. Question what prophecies? Before anyone could answer, Naren gasped, doubling over. Her orange markings suddenly flared with blinding intensity, shifting and rearranging themselves across her skin into more complex patterns. What's happening to her? Richard demanded, rushing to her side. The awakening, Eli explained, their voice filled with all the primal pattern emerges. Richard cradled Naren as her body trembled with the transformation. Her skin burned hot against as her markings now forming intricate, fractal-like designs that seemed to move with a life of their own. Richard, she whispered, her eyes finding his. I can feel it, the knowledge, the power. It's overwhelming. I'm here, he assured her, holding her close. I won't leave you. The transformation lasted several minutes, during which the assembled Luminari watched in reverent silence. When it finally subsided, Naren stood with Richard support. Her appearance subtly but significantly altered. Her orange markings now formed complex geometric patterns that seemed to contain entire universes within them, and her eyes shimmered with newfound power and understanding. I understand now, she said, her voice stronger, more resonant. What my father was protecting, or what the traditionalists fear. What is it? Richard asked. The ability to merge consciousness across species, she explained, to share not just thoughts or emotions, but entire ways of being. The primal pattern is a key to true unity between all sentient life. She turned to face him fully, her transformed markings pulsing with emotion. This is why the connection between us matters. Humans and Luminary once joined in. Understanding could lead to coalition into a new era of cooperation, and the traditionalists fear this. Richard asked. They fear change, Elliot interjected. They fear losing what makes us Luminary. Barbara, but that's not what would happen. Naren insisted we wouldn't lose ourselves. We would expand, grow, as all living things must. She placed her hands on Richard's chest, her markings responding to his proximity. What we began in that sleeping bag, the curiosity, the exploration, the connection, it was a first step towards something greater than either of us. Richard covered her hand with his own, feeling a strange resonance between them, as if her energy was harmonizing with his at some fundamental level. When we return to my quarters, she said softly for his ears, alone, I would show you the full meaning of Luminari joining not just bodies, but minds and spirits. The invitation sent a thrill through him that was equal parts desire and trepidation. Is that safe for either of us with the primal pattern awakened? In me, yes, she assured him. It will be unlike anything you've experienced. Unlike anything any human has experienced. With Luminari, the gathering concluded with a ceremonial blessing, after which Naren and Richard were escorted back to their chambers. Now a single larger space that had been prepared for them as a bonded pair. Despite no formal announcement of such a relationship, your people seemed to be making assumptions, Richard observed as they entered the chamber, which was now filled with softly glowing crystals and fragrant blooms. Luminari can sense the energy between compatible beings. Naren explained, her transformed markings casting complex patterns of light across the walls. They knew what we would choose. Before we did as the door sealed behind them, she turned to him, her expression both vulnerable and determined. "Richard, Mills of Earth," she said formally, "I invite you to join with me in body, mind, and spirit to forge a bond that transcends our separate species." Richard stepped closer, drawn to her with an intensity that defied explanation. "And what happens after when we reach Proxima, everything changes," she said simply, "for both of us, for our peoples." He cupped up her face, gently studying the mesmerizing patterns that now adorned her skin. "No pressure then," he said with a small smile. She laughed a sound like music, her markings brightening with joy. None at all. Their lips met, and with that kiss the final barriers between them began to dissolve. What followed was a joining unlike any in human experience, a melding of bodies and consciousness that transcended physical pleasure, revealing the true meaning behind her innocent exploration in that shared sleeping bag. So many days ago in the aftermath, as they lay entwined, Richard understood that his life would never be the same, that the path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges from both the luminary traditionalists and those within the coalition who would fear such a union. But in that moment with Naren's transformed markings pulsing in harmony with his heartbeat, those concerns seemed distant and manageable. "What happens now?" he asked, tracing the intricate patterns on her shoulder. "Now," she replied, her eyes reflecting the light of distant stars, "we prepare to face what comes next together." The Voyager emerged from a nebula 3 days later, its systems fully repaired and enhanced with subtle luminary modifications that wouldn't be immediately obvious to coalition inspectors. Richard stood on the bridge, watching as the swirling gases receded behind them, feeling both renewed and fundamentally changed. "Course," he set for Proxima Station, Jackson reported, giving his captain a knowing glance. The entire crew had noticed the transformation in their relationship with Naren, though none dared comment directly. "Proceed at standard speed," Richard ordered. No need to draw attention by rushing. Naren entered the bridge, now dressed in a formal luminary diplomatic outfit that complemented her transformed markings, while still allowing them to be visible to crews. Eyes widened slightly at her appearance. She radiated a quiet power that hadn't been present before. "Captain," she greeted him formally, though her eyes conveyed a much more intimate message. "May I speak with you?" Privately in his ready room, away from curious eyes, she immediately moved into his embrace, her markings brightening at his touch. Their connection had deepened since their joining, creating a bond that transcended physical attraction. When they touched, Richard could sense her emotions, catch glimpses of her thoughts and experience, both exhilarating and occasionally overwhelming. The sanctuary's long-range sensors detected Krell vessels near Proxima. She informed him, "Commander Vexner is persistent." Not surprising," Richard replied, stroking her silver hair. "We embarrassed him by slipping away. And if your father was right about the Krell's interest in luminary technology, he was..." She confirmed, "During my transformation, I accessed memories my father embedded in the primal pattern. He identified the Krell as primary collaborators with the traditionalists seeking to exploit our technology for their empire's expansion." Richard whistled softly. "That's a serious accusation. We'll need evidence," which is precisely what awaits us at Proxima. Naren explained, "My father established a secure data vault there containing everything he discovered, but we must reach it before Vexner intercepts us. We will," Richard assured her. "The Voyager has a few new tricks now, thanks to your people." She smiled, tracing the line of his jaw with her finger. "Our people, Richard, after what we've shared, you're as much luminary as I am human." The sentiment warmed him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. Their intimate connection had revealed aspects of each other that transcended species, hopes, fears, dreams, and desires that were fundamentally the same despite their different origins. "I'm still getting used to the idea that your father planned all this," he admitted. "That he chose me specifically. He recognized something in you that complemented something in me," she said, "but he couldn't have predicted how we would feel about each other. That was our choice." Richard thought back to that first night in the sleeping bag, her innocent curiosity, his surprise at her directness. How far they'd come since then. "When you first put your hands in my boxers," he said with a smile, "did you really not know what you were touching?" Naren laughed, her markings pulsing with amusement. "I knew they were reproductive organs, but I didn't understand their sensitivity or cultural Significance to Luminari touch is communication first, pleasure second, and... Now, yes, pulling her closer. Now I understand both aspects quite thoroughly, she replied with a mischievous glint in her. I find I require regular cultural exchanges to maintain my understanding. Their playful moment was interrupted by the ship's alert system, Captain to the bridge. Jackson's voice came through the comm. We're being hailed by a Krell vessel. On the bridge, the view screen showed the now familiar reptilian face of Commander Vexner, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights of his ship. Captain Mills, he greeted coldly. You've led us on quite a chase. We're on a sanctioned mission to Proxima Station, Richard replied evenly as you... Well, no plans have changed. Vexner countered, his forked tongue flicking. Between sharp teeth, by order of the Krell Empire, you are to surrender the Luminari Princess. Immediately we have reason to believe she possesses technology that threatens galactic security. Naren stepped forward her. Transform markings pulsing with controlled intensity. Commander Vexner, I am Naren Nix's daughter of High Counselor Tura Nix and rightful heir to the Luminary Collective. I formally request asylum within the Coalition under Article 7 of the Interspecies Protection. Accord. Vexner's vertical pupils narrowed to thin slits. That's a bold move, Princess, but it won't work. We have evidence that you're carrying prohibited technology. The only technology one carry is that which is part of me, she replied, gesturing to her markings, and I have evidence of my own. Evidence that the Krell Empire conspired with Luminari traditionalists to steal and weaponize our technology. For the first time, Vexner looked genuinely alarmed, his scales shifting color. Slightly serious accusations requires serious evidence, which is precisely what awaits us at Proxima Station. Richard interjected a secure data vault containing everything High Counselor Nix discovered before his assassination. A tense silence followed. As Vexner visibly calculated his options, finally, he said, Very well, we will escort you to Proxima, but be warned, any deviation from course will be considered hostile action. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew exchanging nervous glances. He's planning something, Jackson muttered. Of course he is, Richard agreed, but so are we. The journey to Proxima Station proceeded. Under the watchful eye of Vexner's vessel, Richard and Naren used the time to prepare utilizing the Luminary enhancements to scan the Krell ship and confirm their suspicions. Vexner was indeed working with the traditionalists. When they finally docked at Proxima, a delegation of Coalition officials was waiting along with Vexner and his Krell security team, their scale bodies encased in formidable armor. This is where it gets complicated, Richard murmured to Naren as they prepared to disembark. She squeezed his hand, her markings pulsing reassuringly together. Remember, as they stepped onto the station, Vexner immediately moved to intercept them, flanked by armed Krell officers. Princess Naren, you will come with us for questioning. I think not, Commander, came an authoritative voice from behind him. An elderly human woman stepped forward, her Coalition diplomatic uniform adorned with the insignia of the High Council. Admiral Helena Cameron, she introduced herself. High Counselor Nix contacted me before his death. I've been expecting you both. Vexner's scales darkened with anger. Admiral, this is a Krell Empire matter. It is a matter of interspecies diplomacy and potential treaty violation. Cameron corrected sharply, and as such it falls under Coalition jurisdiction. She gestured to her own security team, who moved to surround Vexner and his officers. Commander Vexner, you and your team are confined to your vessel pending investigation into allegations of conspiracy and espionage, as Vexner was escorted away, hissing threats in his native tongue. Admiral Cameron turned to Richard and Naren. High Counselor Nix's data vault has been secured. Its contents are illuminating, to say the least. Then you know about the weapon the traditionalists were developing with the Krell? Naren asked. Cameron nodded grimly. And about the primal pattern you carry, the implications are staggering. Not a weapon, Richard clarified. A bridge between species, between minds. Yes, Cameron agreed, studying them both with keen interest. I can see that now. The connection between you is visible even to those without luminary perception. She led them to a private conference room where representatives from both the Coalition and the Luminary Collective awaited. The next hours were filled with explanations, revelations, and negotiations as Naren presented her father's evidence in her vision for the Future through it all, Richard stood beside her, their bond serving as living proof of what was possible when different species truly connected. 3 months later, Richard stood on the observation deck of a newly commissioned diplomatic vessel Convergence, watching as Earth grew larger in the view screen beside him. Naren's markings pulsed with excitement. Nervous? He asked, taking her hand. Little, she admitted. Meeting your family is significant. He laughed softly. They're going to love you, though I should warn you, my sister will have 1,000 questions about Luminary reproduction after everything we've been through. I think I can handle curious humans, she replied with a smile there. New assignment as joint ambassadors of the Human Luminary Cultural Exchange Initiative was both an honor and a challenge. A revelation of the primal pattern's potential had sent shockwaves to the coalition, opening possibilities for deeper understanding between species that had previously seemed impossible. Not everyone approved. Of course, the traditionalists still had supporters, and the Krell Empire had formally protested the coalition's interference in what they claimed was a legitimate security operation, but the tide was turning with more voices supporting connection than isolation. Do you ever think about that first night? Naren asked suddenly in the sleeping bag. Richard smiled, remembering her innocent curiosity, her hand seeking warmth in unexpected places. Often who would have thought that offering to share my sleeping bag would lead to all this? I knew, she said softly, her markings pulsing with emotion. Not consciously, perhaps, but something in me recognized something in you from the first moment, as if we were always meant to find each other. He pulled her close, marveling at how natural it felt now, this connection between human and Luminari that had begun with a simple offer warmth and evolved into something that might change the galaxy. What you did next, he murmured against her hair, was indeed unexpected. Naren laughed, her markings brightening with joy. And we're just getting started. As Earth filled the view screen, Richard felt a profound sense of brightness. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together, a union of human determination and luminary wisdom that had begun in the most unexpected way possible. Sometimes, he reflected, the greatest journeys begin with the smallest gestures.